a quick chat with him. But in between serving customers, he's frantically on his phone, kind of texting and calling and speaking to people. He actually just told me that he's got through to a couple of them, and they told him that they were actually at the accident site, and they sort of just ran there and got into action and started trying to help people in any way that he could. So he has actually got hold of a few friends back there, yeah.
And Molly, from the community that you've spoken to today, are there any plans for special prayers or events to mark what we've seen today?
I have actually been up to one of the temples here, but they currently haven't got any plans. I think everyone's just kind of trying to understand what's happened, and this, and they haven't got current plans right now. But a couple of people I have spoken to are hoping to be able to get down to the temple at some point tomorrow, to kind of show their respects and pray for people there.
Molly Parella, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Radio 1's Newsbeat reporter there, reporting from that vibrant Gujarati community in Wembley in North London, and we will go back to Molly if we can at some point further on in the show. It's now 19 minutes past 4. Now, just as a recap, the afternoon's news is being dominated by this Air India plane crash. If you're just tuning in, here's what we know so far. The plane was a Boeing 787 on its way to Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. More than 240 people were on board. 169 Indian nationals, 53 British, 7 Portuguese and 1 Canadian. The plane crashed into a doctor's hostel in a residential area. It had only reached a height of 625 feet, that's 190 metres. The cause of the crash as yet isn't known. There are reports that a British man has survived the crash and is now in hospital. There are a couple of numbers, as Claire has just mentioned, for people to call if they're concerned about friends or relatives who may have been on the flight. Air India's number is 0091806 277 9200. That's 0091806 277 9200. And if you need consular assistance, please call 0207 008 5000. That's 0207 008 5000. Right, you are listening to 5 Live Drive. Claire McDonald is in Gatwick. Claire, what's the latest there?
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, it's a very strange juxtaposition of people kind of arriving and going off on their holidays, because this was a tragedy that happened thousands of miles away, and then as time passes and you gradually get an inkling of where those British nationals are from, then it starts to feel a little bit more real. But right now, people are turning up for their holidays, going through the departure lounge. We've been moved to the North Terminal. There are 2 terminals here at Gatwick. The South Terminal is where Air India flies into. I mean, there's pictures of their desks completely deserted. There's absolutely no point in turning up here today. If you were due to get on that 8:30 flight to Goa, that has been cancelled. So all Air India flights from Gatwick today are completely cancelled. So all their desks are deserted. So Air India normally flies from the South Terminal. That's where the international departures go from. We've been moved on to the North Terminal, which is where all the media are gathering. And as I said, it's a story of global interest. There are journalists up there beaming their TV pictures and their reports around the world because of the number of people who are on that plane from different parts of the world. And there is a relatives room that has been set up here. I mean, if this plane had crashed nearer to the time when it was due to arrive here, I think we'd be looking at an entirely different situation, because there would have been an awful lot of people here waiting already. But because obviously it was due in many hours, because it only crashed just after takeoff, people haven't turned up here. But that's not to say that Gatwick aren't taking this very seriously and saying, look, if you do turn up here, there will be a relatives point where you can come to, and we will give you all the information and all the support that you need. But right now there isn't anybody here. The press are here. It's of interest to many people, but as I say, people passing through Gatwick Airport, getting on with their holidays. I mean, just to recap, the MP for Leicester East has said she understands a handful of Leicester residents were on board the crash plane. Shivani Raja has spoken to the BBC and said she spoke to Rajini Vajanathan, our correspondent, our colleague, who we'll be talking to in the next hour here on Drive. She said her community has a high population of British Gujaratis is really horrified and devastated waking up to such tragic news. She says, so far my understanding is that there are a handful of Leicester residents who were on board that flight, but I'm still awaiting official reports on that. Air India have also said they're organising 2 relief flights to Ahmedabad for families of the passengers involved in the plane crash and airline staff as well, of course. The airline is sending return flights from Delhi and Mumbai that will arrive at 11 o'clock local time. It's 6:30 British Summer Time, and depart shortly after 1 a.m. local time on Friday. And the airline said next of kin of passengers and staff in Delhi and Mumbai wanting to travel on these flights, they've given out a hotline for that. And obviously that's for people locally who fear that they may have lost someone. The number over here, and we can't say this enough really, Gordon, the number for you to call if you have concerns about anybody on that flight is this. It's the Foreign Office number 0207 008 5000. That's 0207 008 5000.
It's 25 minutes, just about 25 minutes past 4. Some news just breaking: a senior politician has died in the crash. Gujarat's former Chief Minister Vijay Rupani has been killed in the plane crash. India's Civil Aviation Minister has told reporters. Rupani, 68, served as the Chief Minister of the Western Indian state for 5 years between 2016 and 2021. He was a member of the governing BJP party. Now, we're going to speak to an aviation expert. Doug McLean joins us now. Good afternoon, Doug.
Good afternoon.
Doug, I'd imagine you've had some time now to analyse some footage. What can you tell us from what you've seen? What are your initial thoughts?
Very difficult to actually say what caused it would appear from the footage that emerged this afternoon, taken from the airport, which showed the airplane departing fairly normally along the runway, and then only climbing to probably 500-600 feet, somewhere like that, and then slowly descending again. So whether or not the airplane had lost lift or whether or not it had lost power, it's difficult to tell, and the data, flight data recorders will actually tell what was happening on board the airplane at that time.
Doug, is there any significance in the landing gear still being out?
I wouldn't have said so, in that it may indicate that the crew actually were aware early on of a problem. So, I mean, normally, yes, you'd be seeing the landing gear retract as soon as there's a positive rate of climb and the airplane's climbing away. So it may have been that the indication was that to the crew that they were not climbing away correctly, and the initial thoughts might be to put the airplane back down again, but obviously it travelled almost a full length of the runway by that time, so it wouldn't have been possible. But again, that's exactly the sort of information that will be picked up on the data recorders. So the cockpit voice recorder in particular records not only the voices of the pilots, but it also records any alarms, alerts, etc., any noise that's in the cockpit. So the investigators will get a really clear idea of what was actually happening, and then the other data recorder will tell you the speed of the aircraft, the power from the engines, etc. So between all that investigation, I wouldn't think it would be terribly long before they have some indication of what the cause was.
Having listened to aviation experts this afternoon on 5 Live, there's been some conversation about the flaps and whether or not they were set properly, but they surely would have had a configuration warning, would they not, if they weren't set properly?
The 787 is a pretty sophisticated aeroplane, and it has all sorts of guards, if you like, against wrong settings. I couldn't possibly comment, and I don't think anybody can really comment from a video what actually was set on board the aeroplane and how it was set. We're talking about an experienced crew and an aeroplane that they'd handled many times. And again, the configuration, everything will become clear from the investigation, or we would certainly expect it to become clear from the investigation, because there are 1,100 of these, or more than 1,100 of these airplanes flying every day, and the airplane has an excellent, blemish-free safety record until today. So the aviation authorities will want to know, was there something odd about the airplane, or was there something wrong about the way the airplane was set up, or whatever. So the aviation community will be very keenly waiting to find out what the initial results are, which will probably come fairly quickly. Normally within about 30 days, we would expect to see an interim report which will point towards where the investigators are looking.
You mentioned the crew, Doug. How many pilots would be on board a Dreamliner? Is it 3?
No, it's just 2. It's a modern 2-crew aeroplane. Most, in fact, all modern airplanes are set up that way. So, and there are so many electronic systems to assist the pilots now that 2 is very adequate to fly a sophisticated airplane like this.
Doug, we are hearing reports of the survivor, which just sounds remarkable. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, remarkable is the description. I mean, the chances of surviving something like that are minimal, and it is verging on miraculous that someone came out of that airplane. It says a bit about what the safety of the airplane, the way it's constructed, to everything that's built into safety for all the airplanes, that someone actually managed to survive that.
We believe the seat he was in was 11A. Is there any significance to that at all, that he was in that part of the plane?
No, I don't know, to be quite honest.
Okay, again, how much fuel would have been on board a Dreamliner for that length of journey, that distance?
Yeah, I mean, the airplane's fully fueled to fly there. And the 787, I don't know how many gallons of fuel it'd be carrying, but it'd be very near its maximum fuel uptake for a flight like that.
Doug, you mentioned the impeccable safety record of the Dreamliner, but what's Boeing's performance been like in recent years? There have been a number of problems for them. Boeing has had issues, there's no doubt about it. Not the Dreamliner. The Dreamliner has it is a very safe airplane, and this airplane has flown for years now. Both that particular one and the type of airplane. The 737 MAX, which was the one that caused the tragic accidents before, and some of the practices that were being investigated in Boeing were not, they're probably not the best, but it's a huge company and has a great technical record, and I'm sure whatever problems they have had, they've taken them very seriously, because aviation is such a safe method of travel. That there is no company in aviation, no professional company in aviation, which doesn't take safety seriously, which is why it is without doubt, without hesitation, the safest way to travel. Doug McLean, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, aviation consultant. It's now 4:32.
The Voice of the UK.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
And here are your headlines. Local media in the western Indian city of Ahmedabad are reporting that one British passenger has survived this morning's plane crash. He's been pictured in a hospital bed. The Air India flight to London Gatwick came down in a residential area just minutes after takeoff. Police say they've recovered more than 200 bodies so far. 53 of the 242 passengers on board the Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner were British. There were 169 Indian nationals, 7 Portuguese citizens and 1 Canadian on board. Police in Northern Ireland are updating journalists after 3 nights of rioting. They say the violence is absolutely race motivated, and those involved will face speedy justice. Unrest began in Ballymena after 2 teenage boys appeared in court charged with a sexual assault on a girl. Around 9,000 former employees of the retailer will share £2 million. The GMB union said the money was awarded by an employment tribunal because it decided the company had failed to properly consult staff prior to going bust in 2023. Let's get the sport headlines now with Shannon Eunice-Stewart.
Well, day 2 of the World Test Championship final between South Africa and Australia has been an interesting one as the momentum has shifted back and forth. Henry Moran has the latest from Lords.
Yes, another dramatic day here at the home of cricket. The Australian lead 134 runs. They're currently 60 for 4, but that big partnership, the dangerous partnership between Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith has come to an end. Both Smith and Labuschagne dismissed in the last half an hour, and it leaves the game tantalisingly poised. Australia 60 for 4, the lead 134.
Don't miss a ball. There's commentary over on 5 Sports Extra now. Masters champion Rory McIlroy has been among the best starters on the opening day of the US Open at Pennsylvania's Oakmount Country Club. Our golf correspondent Ian Carter is there.
Yes, but he's struggling now because on the par 5 fourth he's tangled with the rough and just played his 5th shot in to the green. He's got a lengthy putt coming up for a bogey there. He dropped a shot at the first, which was his 10th hole, so currently at 1 under par. It looks like he may be about to drift to 1 over par, and that would be 5 shots off the lead, which continues to be held by a bogey-free player, JJ Spawn of the United States, 4 under for the 14 holes that he's played. He's 1 clear of Gary Woodland and 2 clear of a group that includes Ludwig Åberg. As for other Britons in the field, Jordan Smith going very nicely, the Bath Pro at level par after 15 holes. Bob McIntyre's at 1 over after 10. Tommy Fleetwood at 2 over par. Shane Lowry's at 4 over, and Justin Rose at 4 over, playing alongside McIlroy.
Ian, thank you. You can follow the leaderboard on the BBC Sport website and also what's happening over at Queen's. The incoming British #1 Emma Raducanu is hoping to do what Katie Bolter and Heather Watson couldn't and reach the quarter-finals today. Her turn on Andy Murray Arena, watched by Russell Fuller.
And a dominant start by Raducanu against Rebecca Schramkova, a player ranked just 4 places below her, who beat an admittedly rusty Wimbledon champion Barbora Krejcikova in the first round. Schramkova does, though, have meagre grass court experience, and Raducanu off to a flyer. She's already broken twice, leads by 3 games to love, but the sign of the start of a comeback perhaps now for Schramkova, who has love 40 and a chance to get one of the breaks back.
Kevin De Bruyne has completed his move to Napoli. The Belgian midfielder left Manchester City at the end of the Premier League season and will now link up with former Chelsea and Tottenham manager Antonio Conte at the Italian champions. England under-21s manager Lee Carsley says he wants to lead his young Lions to victory in a 2nd successive European Championships. The squad has changed from the one who lifted the trophy 2 years ago, but the boss says he wants the winning mentality to remain the same.
I still want us to have that pressure of trying to do it because we've not come to Slovakia for potentially 3 weeks of a break. I want the players to be in a position where England have qualified for a major tournament. We're expected to win, and why not? Why can't we? Why shouldn't we? Why should we be prepared to win? And that's what we're trying.
England get their campaign underway tonight in the group stage against Czechia. Kick-off is at 8 p.m. You can listen to the match on 5 Sports Extra. That's your latest from BBC Sport.
Right, let's get the travel now with Lorna Merchant.
Thanks, Gordon. Looking at the M69 first and northbound queues near the M1 at junction 21. We've got a queue of half an hour there. Nothing going on though. The M4 in South Wales, it's flooding. It's near Llandasi. Eastbound on the M4 at junction 43, 1 lane closed. And the M48 Severn Bridge has restrictions in case it needs to be closed. Later on, it's strong winds. That's the problem. M1 looking slow. We've got 2 lanes blocked northbound at junction 10 at Luton Airport Spur. An accident involving a van. Then the M25. So it's from 13 clockwise towards Heathrow at junction 14. There was an accident. All lanes are open. We're just looking at the queues. Anti-clockwise queue still there. 1 lane closed at junction 29 Romford. So that is after the tunnels. Queues have been backing up. We've got the A34 in Oxford, partly blocked by an accident near the Petrey interchange northbound. Queues back to the Hinksey Hill interchange. And delays on the trains between Milton Keynes Central and Rugby. And that's because of a broken down freight train. Warner Merchant, 5 Live Travel.
The Voice of the UK.
This is 5 Live Drive.
Welcome back to Gatwick Airport. I'm live from Gatwick this afternoon, and the reason I'm here, as you'll know by now, is that a London-bound Air India plane carrying 242 people crashed shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad, and it was due to land here at Gatwick just after 6:30 this evening. Local police in Ahmedabad say 204 bodies have been recovered, with reports that one passenger is a British man, Viwash Kumar Ramesh, and that he has survived. Now, we've had this just in from our colleague Navtej Jodhal in Leicester. He's spoken to Mr. Ramesh's cousin, who says Vishwash Kumar Ramesh called his family earlier to say he's fine and that he heard the blast. He also told them he didn't know the whereabouts of his brother AJ, who was a fellow passenger on the plane. Now, their relatives have gathered at the family home where they are awaiting more information. Mr. Ramesh has a wife and a child who are not on board the plane. The BBC understands that he was born in India but has lived in the UK for many years. So more on that. It would seem a British survivor of this crash who is in Leicester. Air India says there were 169 Indian nationals, 53 British people on board, 7 Portuguese nationals and 1 Canadian on the flight. The plane crashed, as we've been hearing, into accommodation used by trainee doctors who were actually having their lunch in the dining hall at the moment of impact. We can get more now from Ahmedabad with Himanshu Bayani, a journalist in the province of Gujarat and formerly of the BBC Gujarati service. Himanshu, thank you so much for joining us. I know the army have sealed off the site, but you are close by. Let's start with what you're hearing about reports of this one passenger, we believe is a British national, who survived the crash.
Yes, Claire, good evening to the viewers. Good evening to the listeners also. Yes, what we learn is that he has survived this crash, and equally the area has now been constant. It has been under the control of the kind of security personnel over there, of course army and other CISF personnel. The green corridor was created, most of them have been shifted. The building which was there, the medical college building, there also we are getting the news of casualty and people have died over there. But yet we are waiting the official confirmation from the government on this end. That's what is being awaited. And air operations are likely to resume. That's what we learned from the airport authority sources. Yet there is no clear indication that which flights will be flying in or flying out. Whether the international flights are flying in or flying out, that is yet not confirmed. This is the present scenario. The survivor, what we learned, he had managed to jump out of that plane and he has survived. And that is what we are learning. And of course his brother, there is no whereabouts of his brother, but he had called his relatives, and that's exactly what we learned, what was narrated on the show just now.
It's such early days after such a tragedy. I can imagine there are many, many relatives where you are, Himanshu, who want answers. What are you hearing about possible causes?
The way we see the video, the user-generated content which has been making out on the social media platforms and on the internet, we see that in 55 seconds the plane which took off could not take off and just glided like a bird. From the tail point, and it crashed at the side. So I think we are not able to confirm yet, but I think the black box recoveries, the day calls given to the air traffic control, I think that situation is something what we will have to wait for the investigations, the air crash investigations, and the possible cause which is coming out of there have been CCTV footages which are again making rounds on social media. And based on that, what I see is that the plane could not take off exactly. So why the plane could not take off, whether it was the engine failure, whether there was something wrong in the cockpit, these reasons we'll have to wait to exactly gauge as to what was the reason why the plane could not take off and just glided from the tail like a bird.
And we're reading, this has been confirmed in the last few minutes, that Gujarat's former Chief Minister Vijay Rupani was on that plane. India's Civil Aviation Minister has told reporters he served as Chief Minister for the Western Indian states. He was a member of the governing BJP party. This is it going to be devastating news for people in that area?
Yes, initially it was not being confirmed, but later on there was a confirmation from the media, and later on even the government confirmed. And most of the BJP leaders, because Vijay Rupani was a veteran leader who had participated during the emerging government also. He was one of the leaders who had come from the outfit of Bharatiya Janata Party, that is called Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad. So he had fought as a student against the emergency of Indira Gandhi, late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi also. And most of the BJP leaders, the veteran BJP leaders across India are flying in for his lives. What we learned is that his wife was in London and his two colleagues, Nitin Bhardwaj and Dhansukh Banderi, they are also accompanying his wife. They are flying from London and they are likely to reach tomorrow by afternoon. And by that time, after that, I think the last flight will be performed. That's what we learned. Most of the media in India and of course the media in Gujarat basically were trying to confirm that news, and they were not able to get the confirmation exactly. But later on there was the confirmation after almost an hour or so when his name in the passenger list, the passenger manifesto of the airline, as well as his boarding pass and his boarding details were already viral on the social media.
That was Himanshu Bayani, their journalist in the province of Gujarat, formerly of the BBC Gujarati service. It's now 5:15. And we're going to get back to the UK now for more on the Air India crash here. Bhavik Dipal is a volunteer at the Neaston Hindu Temple in northwest London, which is the largest Hindu temple in Europe. Good afternoon, Bhavik.
Good afternoon, Gordon. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for coming on this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. I know you've been talking to people at the temple today. Can you just articulate how people are feeling in Neaston today?
Well, Gordon, I'm currently just sat inside Neaston Temple. And obviously it's a very sad day, full of shock and grief. Obviously totally unexpected, innocent loss of life, as your colleague before I just came onto the air was articulating. So it's an immensely sad time, completely shocking, and our thoughts and prayers and hearts go out to the families that have been impacted by this very unfortunate but devastating incident.
So many people, Bhavik, in your community will know somebody at Ahmedabad, won't they? And that flight in particular is something that I'd imagine a lot of people in the community will have taken regularly.
No, absolutely. You're very right to say that. And the Gujarati community is obviously very close-knit, and as you mentioned, it is an airline, and that's the airline that people would regularly use. So it has, as I mentioned, become a bit of a shock, very saddening, and obviously people are gathering and offering their prayers, and we will be doing very similar at Neaston Temple at 6:45 this evening. We'll be offering special prayers for those who have lost their lives and also for the families who have obviously lost loved ones in this tragic way.
I was going to ask, Bob, how do you respond to this? How do you support your community after a tragedy like this?
Neaston Temple, we're a place of worship, so we'll be offering our prayers here. The Swamis who reside at the temple will be offering and leading the prayer ceremony this evening at 6:45 p.m. And our spiritual leader, His Holiness Mahant Swami Maharaj, who is in India currently, has offered his prayers for those who have lost their lives, and for the families, to give them the courage, the strength, and the warmth, the love that they require at this time.
And Bobby, can you tell us much about Ahmedabad? For anyone who doesn't know the area, doesn't know the city, can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. It's one of the largest cities in the state of Gujarat, which is in the western part of India. It's a thriving community full of life and vigor, and really it's very shocking to see the images, as everybody would have seen, I'm sure you have seen as well, that are coming out of Ahmedabad today. And our headquarters of BAPS, where we sit as an organisation, is also in Ahmedabad, and our volunteers are readily willing to help the local authorities as required, so we've dispatched our relief efforts there as well.
Well, Bobby, best of luck and provide some solace for your community through these difficult times. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, William.
That's Bhavik Dipal, a volunteer at the Neaston Hindu Temple in north west London. It's now 4:48.
You're listening to 5 Live Drive this afternoon with Gordon Smart and me, Claire MacDonald, live from Gatwick Airport. I'm here because this afternoon's news, understandably, is being dominated by the Air India plane crash. If you're just tuning in, here's what we know so far. The plane was a Boeing 787 on its way from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. More than 240 people were on board. 169 Indian nationals, 53 British, 7 Portuguese and 1 Canadian. The plane crashed into a doctor's hostel in a residential area. It had only reached a height of 625 feet, that's 190 metres, as it was taking off, and then essentially just glided to the ground. It failed to get any more height, and that is what caused the crash. There are still reports coming in that a British man survived the crash and is now in hospital. So we are attempting to verify that, but the man is from London, we understand. And there are a couple of numbers for people to call if they're concerned about friends or relatives who may have been on that flight. Air India's number is this. It's 0091 806 277 9200. That's 0091 806 277 9200. And also, if you are here and you need consular assistance, if you are a friend or a family member, please call this number. It is 0207 008 5000.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The voice of the UK.
5 Live Drive.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
10 to 5, Gordon Smart and Claire MacDonald with you. Claire's in Gatwick this afternoon, and we have more news about the Air India crash for you now. We have details about 3 of the British people on board. They are Akhil Nanabawa, his wife Hannah, Varaji and their daughter. They lived in Gloucester. We'll have more on that as we get it. Now, to another big story that has been dominating the news over recent nights. Downing Street has condemned what is called a disgraceful attack on a leisure centre that was sheltering migrant families in County Antrim. Masked youth set fire to the centre. The families were safely relocated. Unrest began in Ballymena, near Ballymena, this week after 2 teenage boys appeared in court charged with a sexual assault on a girl. The Irish Premier, Michael Martin, says he is horrified by the disorder. Freelance journalist Amanda Ferguson was in Ballymena last night and joins me now. Good afternoon, Amanda.
Good afternoon.
Amanda, first of all, how are things today after a really lively couple of days in Northern Ireland?
Well, it's just a sort of horrific aftermath of everything that's happening. There's a big political row brewing over the Communities Minister Gordon Lyons from the DUP. The police have said that so far there have been 41 officers injured and 13 people have been arrested. And make no mistake, these violent attacks are racially motivated. They're racist in nature, and it seems as if all of these issues over the last few days are being conflated with issues around housing and immigration and end of violence against women and girls, whenever it's women and girls and babies, pregnant mums having to flee their homes in terror because they're being targeted by people. So it's a pretty grim picture, and there's further what are described as peaceful protests planned for this evening in various locations in Northern Ireland. But what we're seeing after these peaceful protests is that there is some element of street disorders in a range of towns across the place, and it's having a knock-on effect. First of all, it looks awful. It's a terrible image to be portraying to the rest of the world, but it's also causing fear among people. It's having an impact on businesses. It's having an impact on commuters and public transport, and there doesn't appear to be an end in sight to it, but in my experience, people can't riot forever.
Amanda, you were there and thereabouts. How volatile and how unsafe has the situation been through your eyes?
Yeah, you're dealing with some pretty extreme people. They raised their head last year in the aftermath of the murders of the children in Southport. There had been rioting in Britain, and then about a week later it started in Northern Ireland. and then that was the last sort of major episode of rioting. And whenever I was speaking to the people who were on what they were generously described as anti-immigration protests, there were victims of misinformation and disinformation, but there were also like openly racist, fascist people there, people doing Nazi salutes and the rest. And we've seen in the violence in the last 3 days that you have people who are suggesting that people's ethnicity makes them more likely to be predators, and the facts just don't bear that out. People know that violence against women and girls is something that can emanate from any population, any ethnicity and background, sadly, and there is an element as well that whenever there's rioting in Northern Ireland, young people can be enticed towards the exhilaration of it, the sort of recreational rioting as it can sometimes be described. But this can end in tears, it can end in death. We've seen that happen in the past, that whenever you're throwing petrol bombs and whenever you're smashing windows and targeting people in such sort of extreme ways, and people with masks over their faces and all the rest of it, I keep worrying that someone's going to die.
And this is the thing, Amanda, this is your patch, this is home for you, but I think people will be familiar with sectarian trouble, but is this something that's been simmering underneath that we weren't aware of? Is it something new?
It's not entirely new, but what we have seen in recent years as the peace process has embedded, and while sectarianism still exists, the number of hate crimes of a racist nature are starting to outstrip sectarian hate crime, and everybody knows that Northern Ireland's the least diverse part of the UK and Ireland. It's the post-conflict society, so we have much smaller numbers of people making their home here over the years for various reasons, but in recent times there have been more people making their homes here, and in the main there hasn't been a problem. Most people have no issue with sharing space, particularly because Ireland and people from Ireland, the Irish, have had to make their homes all over the world. There's a reason why there's an Irish pub in every country. There's a reason why when any international news story breaks, there will be someone from Ireland, either jurisdiction, right at the centre of it, because of war and famine and economic reasons. Irish people have moved all over the globe. So the idea that other people that are making their homes here aren't welcome just because of the colour of their skin is frankly outrageous. And another issue that's coming up, which will be understood in Scotland as well, is everybody knows that Northern Ireland is a contested place. It's a place that, while it's largely at peace and there's largely an absence of violence, it's a contested place. Some people want to remain part of the UK, other people want to have a united Ireland. And what we're seeing in the sort of nature of the violence and where it's coming from is that so far all of the areas where the violence has been happening are working class, Protestant unionist, loyalist, British identity areas. So it hasn't sort of crossed over into other areas. And the DUP leader Gavin Robinson, who's the leader of unionism, was asked earlier today if he felt that there was a particular problem at the moment within loyalism of racial radicalisation, and he rejected that idea. However, a lot of other commentators and a lot of other people who understand such matters would disagree. So if we're going to have conversations around immigration and access to public services and ending violence against women and girls, we also need to talk about that, because there's no point in not naming it. Like the street disorder is happening in mainly loyalist areas.
And with all of that in mind, Amanda, the British Irish Council is due to meet tomorrow, isn't it? And presumably the riots must be right at the top of the agenda, and it could be quite a formidable afternoon.
Yeah, well, the British Irish Council is one of the structures that flows from the Good Friday Agreement. It was established in 1999, and it includes the leadership of the different member administrations from Scotland and UK and Jersey and Guernsey and Wales and the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland and the Isle of Man government as well. So, this is the first time since I think the council met in Fermanagh a few years back that it's been held in Northern Ireland, and the topic up for discussion is supposed to be around AI, but I can't imagine that the politicians, when they meet for their press conference, are going to be able to escape questions around the violence that's been happening in Northern Ireland, and also there's bigger issues about UK resourcing of UK regions and the political fallout that we're having this row about the communities minister response to what's happened in the last few days. So it could get quite lively, but I'm sure the politicians might want to try and avoid some of those questions, but we'll have to wait and see tomorrow.
Amanda, we have the lighter nights, don't we, at the moment, but as dusk settles this evening, are there any more protests planned? Can you see trouble erupting again?
Yeah, unfortunately I can. You know, there are lists that are circulating online and on social media pages, and we're in the horrific sphere where there are some pages that are asking people to report who and what ethnicity people are in different houses and different streets. And while the police have said that loyalist paramilitaries aren't directly involved in orchestrating the violence, of course some of it's sporadic and some of it is young people just wanting to engage in anti-establishment behaviour, but the idea that these sort of activities will be taking place in mainly sort of loyalist areas, and for loyalist paramilitaries not to be involved in some ways just isn't realistic. So we'll see what happens tonight. I can see a little bit of rain at the minute, which is something that can bring an end to street disorder. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. But there's a concerning issue developing in Portadown where a housing organisation had to write to residents of non-white backgrounds to tell them that there are planned protests this evening and perhaps they might want to leave their homes and go somewhere else. So it's outrageous that we're even having these sort of discussions, and it's something that needs to be tackled, and the police are going to need support from officers in Scotland through the mutual aid arrangements, and resourcing is going to be an issue too.
Thank you, Amanda Price.
It's 5 Live Drive.
It's now 5 o'clock and here are your headlines. A British passenger had reportedly survived after a plane bound for London Gatwick crashed in the Indian city of Ahmedabad. He's believed to have been one of the 53 British citizens on board the Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, which was carrying 242 passengers and crew. 204 bodies have been recovered. Footage shows the plane descending with its wheels down moments after takeoff. Doug McLean is an aviation consultant.
Normally you'd be seeing the landing gear retract as soon as there's a positive rate of climb and the airplane's climbing away, so it may have been that the indication was to the crew that they were not climbing away correctly, and the initial thoughts might have been to put the airplane back down again, but obviously it travelled almost the full length of the runway by that time, so it wouldn't have been possible.
The UK and the United States are sending teams to support the investigation there. Sir Keir Starmer said the scenes from Ahmedabad were devastating. The head of the police service of Northern Ireland says families have hidden in attics and wardrobes to avoid this week's violence in Ballymena. The unrest began after 2 teenage boys, using a Romanian interpreter, appeared in court charged with a sexual assault on a girl, which they deny. Chief Constable John Butcher said the disorder is absolutely race motivated.
It's got completely out of hand. The people who did lawful and legitimate protest, I understand why they did that, and they did that in a way that was responsible and empathetic to the victim of this crime on Saturday. What we've seen since then is simple robbery and criminality, and it's got to stop.
A teenager from London who was tricked into going to boarding school in Africa has won a legal victory against his parents. The Court of Appeal heard that the child was taken to Ghana last year on the premise that a relative was ill, but his parents actually feared he was being drawn into criminal activity. The ruling means the teenager's bid to come back to the UK will now return to the High Court. The Home Office says 400 migrants crossed the Channel to Dover on 6 small boats yesterday. More than 15,000 people have made the journey so far this year. The Environment Agency has declared Yorkshire is a drought after one of the driest springs on record. Met Office statistics show the region had just over 40% of its average rainfall in March, April and May. Let's catch up with the sport now with Shabno Yunus-Jewell.
And it's been a dramatic day at the World Test Championship final between South Africa and Australia. Henry Moran is watching at Lords.
Remarkable, 27 wickets across the 2 days thus far. Australia 76 for 7. They lead by 150 runs, but having reached the tea interval at 32 for 2, it has been some collapse from this Australian side. Lungi Ngidi in particular has bowled brilliantly well to take 3 for 31, and at this point in time the number crunchers have it that South Africa are favourites to win the World Test Championship. Australia 76 for 7, the lead 150.
And there's commentary over on 5 Sports Extra. Emma Raducanu is trying to reach the quarterfinals at Queen's after Katie Bolter and Heather Watson lost in the second round. Bolter's defeat means she relinquishes the British #1 spot to Raducanu, who is trying to take the first set against Rebecca Shramkova. And Kevin De Bruyne has completed his move to Napoli after the Belgian midfielder left Manchester City at the end of the Premier League season.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Let's get the travel now with Orna Merchant.
Thanks, Gordon. It's not doing too badly, really. We've just got major congestion in the usual places, and that's it, really. The M69, it's because of roadworks. Northbound queues approaching the M1 at junction 21 near Leicester, but it's taking a good half an hour. It has reduced from earlier. It was busy earlier on. The M4 in South Wales, junction 43 at Llandarcy. Flooding is in one of the lanes. It's eastbound, heading towards junction 42 at Swansea East. The M48 Severn Bridge, so it has the restrictions in place in case it needs to be closed because of those in its entirety. At the moment, you've just got one lane closed and a speed restriction of 40 miles per hour on both sides. The M1 at junction 10 at Luton Airport Spur, well, 2 lanes are blocked there after an accident which involved a van northbound. The M1 around Luton is queuing for about 50 minutes. That's the latest on the speed sensors. The M25 clockwise queues from 13 Staines round to Heathrow, so it's heading up towards junction 14 after an accident which is cleared. And there's still disruption on the trains between Milton Keynes Central and Rugby, and that's because of a broken down freight train. Delays at 15 minutes. Orna Merchant, 5 Live Travel.
The voice of the UK.
This is 5 Live Drive.
Welcome back to Gatwick Airport. Claire McDonnell live here this afternoon. Gordon Smart back in the studio. We are here because an Air India flight that was due to land here at just before 6:30 this evening crashed shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad in Western India. We are now hearing that more than 200 bodies have been recovered from the site of that London-bound aircraft. 242 people, including 53 British passengers, were on board the flight, which was due to land here this evening. I'm at the North Terminal. All Air India flights come into the South Terminal, that is for international arrivals and departures. But they've moved all the press up to the North Terminal. There is an area here that Gatwick Airport has reserved for family members should people turn up and want to speak to someone face to face about what's going on. Now, the plane came down seconds after takeoff, crashing into a populated area just beyond the runway. And this was the scene from outside one of the hospitals treating those injured in the crash.
Remarkably, one survivor, a British man, is reported to have walked from the wreckage. He is said to be Vishwash Kumar Ramesh. In the last hour, Mr. Ramesh's cousin, AJ Valji, has been speaking to our colleagues in Leicester.
They only said that he's fine, nothing else.
So Vishwash called the family and said he's fine?
He's fine, he said nothing else.
And what happened to his brother, you said? He was sat with his brother on the...
Yeah, they were sitting next to each other. Well, we don't know what happened to his brother. We're not heard anything. There's no any update.
Indian news is reporting that Vishwash is the only survivor of the crash.
Yes, we heard that, but we still can't say anything unless we hear from the proper person.
What was it like hearing that he's okay?
Yeah, at least the family is okay, but we're still upset about the
Quite extraordinary. Well, the plane was a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner, a model which has until now never been involved in a fatal crash. In Ahmedabad, India's civil aviation minister spoke to the media, promising there would be a full investigation into the incident.
I'm totally shaken by the incident that has happened today near Ahmedabad airport. Very tragic and very, very horrific. We are going to do a fair and thorough investigation. We are not going to spare anyone. We are not going to leave any stone unturned.
Well, joining me inside our radio truck here at Gatwick is somebody who knows this area well, BBC presenter Jeannie Vajianathan. And Jeannie, before we start on your experience of living and working there, I know you've been speaking to people in the community here in the UK, so what have you discovered?
I think the first thing to say, Claire, is that
there are many British Gujaratis here in the UK who have a very close bond with back home, as they would say, in India. And we know, for example, from this airport, they said there are 5 direct flights to Gujarat every week. It is a route that several people I've spoken to today would take regularly. It saves having to go via from London to Delhi or Mumbai and change flights. It's a direct flight. Many people have business links in Gujarat. I have friends who literally have businesses, they're British Indians, who have businesses in Ahmedabad, take that plane often. So I think for many people it hits home even if they didn't necessarily know anyone who was on the plane. And for me, as somebody who knows what it's like to fly from London to India on a number of occasions, it sort of conjures up images of all the people who take those journeys, Claire. Grandparents who are going back home. You see families, young babies, children, people who are coming to the UK having moved here, and they're coming back and forth. There's just so many stories and experiences on those flights, and I understand, although we don't know because the victims have not been named, but my understanding is that a large number of the British victims are British Gujaratis or British Indians who were travelling.
We just heard there from Vishwash Kumar Ramesh's relative AJ Valji in Leicester. There are, as you say, there's huge connections with Leicester, aren't there? And I mean, that is the biggest Gujarat community in this country. We also understand that there's an awful lot of families from the Gujarat region in the Brighton and Hove area as well. As this news percolates through, it will take some time for the community to understand who these people are and how it will affect them. There will be vigils, but how do you think the community will cope?
I should also say, Claire, that I've spoken to the MP for Leicester East. I spoke to her a short while ago on the BBC News channel, Shivali Raja, and she told me that she understands that a number of her constituents may have been on that plane. It's not confirmed at the moment. This is still, of course, an unfolding story, but that is her understanding. She said that the community is obviously going through a difficult time. But the other thing that she said, and we have to be careful about how we phrase this, I suppose, is that she said she's one of the people who has taken that flight on a number of occasions. And she said that a family member about a month ago, I think, had taken that flight, and the flight was delayed because of engine problems. She also said that other constituents that she had spoken to had complained about that particular flight, technical issues that meant it was delayed. Have to be very careful because there is an investigation. I don't want to say anything that could be legally compromising, but that is what she wants now to be investigated. She said she's going to speak to the authorities, she's going to raise this with Air India, because she is concerned that maybe there were issues that were flagged before. Now, I should say, Claire, having lived and worked in India for a number of years, unfortunately Air India is no stranger to fatal accidents. During COVID times in 2020 was the last one that I certainly remember. It was an Air India Express flight which crashed in southern India. And on one hand, a lot of people do have stories and fears around flying with Air India. Some of it is a perception. On the other hand, though, Claire, India has a booming airline industry where people who had less disposable income now are able to fly because low-cost airlines, like they boomed in Europe, are everywhere in India. So people that would perhaps in the old days take a train are now flying. So putting it into perspective, the Indian aviation industry is relatively safe if you think about the number of flights that take off and land in that country every single day, the world's most populous country, of course. So that is just a bit of context. And also, Air India has had its problems, it has its cliches and its stigmas, but it is a national treasure in many ways. And most British Indians who listen to this right now will remember going to the travel agent growing up in the UK and seeing the Air India Maharaja on the counter. It's sort of an iconic airline, and I think that is why, Claire, this hits hard for British Indians in so many ways.
Julie, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got to rush off to the news channel now, but we thank you so much for giving us your time and your insights and your expertise in this area. Jeannie Vajanathan, who is a BBC presenter on the news channel, as you heard, a correspondent in that area of India for many, many years and knows it well. Just to reiterate, we're being told that 5 British passengers were on board the flight. They are now being named Akhil Nanabawa, his wife Hannah Boraji, and their daughter who lived in Gloucester. And the British couple, Fionn Gall and Jamie Greenlaw Meek. Now, just to say, the BBC hasn't been able to independently verify this information yet, but of course we will bring you that verification as we get it. Gordon.
It's now 30 minutes past 5. Claire McDonald and Gordon Smart with the 5 Live Drive. Now, Bob Blackman is the Conservative MP for Harrow East, which has one of the highest British Gujarati populations in the UK. Good afternoon, Bob.
Good afternoon.
Bob, thank you for your time. I believe the Gujarati community where you are, they're a very tight community. How hard do you think they'll be hit by this tragedy?
Well, I mean, just in the last half hour, I've heard from one of the temples that in my constituency, where relatives, 4 of the people on the plane are relatives of people that work at the temple, and they've sadly been notified that they've lost their lives. So this is hitting the community very hard indeed, as you can imagine.
Yeah, we believe the Indian Home Minister, by the way, Amit Shah, says he has met the British survivor. We will bring you updates from a news conference he's just been given shortly. But Bob, in Harrow East, you know, what is the feeling locally after this? Because I know you were heavily involved, weren't you, in Ahmedabad flights in the first place?
Yes, indeed. I mean, I was calling for direct flights going between Ahmedabad and London for many years before they eventually got started. Because so many people have made the UK their home and their families are here. And of course they have strong family relationships with people from Gujarat. The other issue that you need to, and the listeners need to understand, of course, is we understand there are something like 53 British nationals who are on this flight, but there are also 169 Indian nationals who are likely to be visiting their families over in the UK on the flight. And the difficulty is obviously getting to the point of understanding who was on the flight, where they were going to go, which family they were visiting, and so on. The Gujarati community is a very close-knit community spread across the United Kingdom, and they have relatives all over the place. And so there will be, I'm afraid, people desperately seeking to know if their relatives were on this plane, and indeed whether there's a chance at all of any of them surviving. And obviously all the thoughts and prayers are with those families and relatives who will be desperately seeking news right now. Air India has, I think, made available the manifest of passengers with the names of passengers that were on the flight and those nationalities where they know them. But of course they don't know where those people were going to be visiting. So it's a pretty desperate time. I do know that Air India have set up an emergency desk at Gatwick Airport to try and give relatives the news. There's the Indian High Commission here has got an emergency number which relatives can call. That's published on social media. And indeed, Air India, I think, have already notified that they're going to provide compensation to the relatives of all the victims of this tragedy.
Bob, is there any other support available for relatives here in the UK?
I think, well, obviously our Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office have been making clear they're working together with the Indian authorities to help UK families to find out what the circumstances are. And obviously I understand from the reports so far that more than 200 bodies have been recovered from the wreckage, and obviously there were 242 passengers on this plane. So they're getting to the point of knowing the extent of the tragedy. At the moment, I can tell you, as we speak, there's a vigil going on at one of my local temples, and there's another vigil I know at another temple later tonight, and that's the temple at which, unfortunately, relatives of the workers at the temple have been notified that they've lost their lives. So there will be further community elements to this over today and the forthcoming days, because obviously it's slowly but surely sinking into the community about the extent of this tragedy.
Bob, when a tragedy such as this happens, how does the communication work between the UK government and the Indian government? What are the lines of communication?
Well, obviously there's strong links between the United Kingdom and the Indian authorities. The Indian authorities have given full cooperation, and we have a very large High Commission in India, We have a Deputy High Commissioner specifically for Gujarat, where obviously where this flight very sadly crashed, and so they will be working hand in glove to make sure that the notification is given to relatives as fast as they possibly can. I mean, it's the uncertainty, of course. I mean, it's a tragedy when anyone dies in these circumstances, but what's worse is the uncertainty of not knowing what the situation is. So they'll be working very closely to try and notify those relatives as quickly as they can.
And Bob, a guest earlier was talking about the size of Ahmedabad and just how big it is, 9 million people, and you mentioned you were part of that campaign to get those flights across. It's a big community with strong links to your particular constituency.
Yes, indeed. I mean, all the families that live in the constituency have got relatives back in Gujarat. As you say, 9 million people in the immediate area around Ahmedabad, and huge numbers of temples and other facilities. Unfortunately, we also know that the aircraft, when it crashed on a student hostel and college and other residential areas, because this is a very densely populated residential area just outside the airport. So at the moment, we don't know how many people have been killed or injured on the ground as yet. And of course, they will have relatives also in the UK. So there's another element of this. Apparently, the hostel was for nursing students. So it's another part of the tragedy, really.
Well, Bob, we're very grateful for your time this afternoon. Best of luck with the constituency and your constituents. Bob Blackman, their Conservative MP for Harrow East, which has one of the highest British Gujarati populations in the UK. It's now coming up for 20 minutes past 5. And with us now is Anita Mendirata, a global aviation consultant. Good evening, Anita.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for your time. We are hearing reports of a survivor, which are scrambling my thoughts at the moment. That's just remarkable, isn't it?
It is indeed, and the word miraculous has been used quite extensively, as is the word devastating when it comes to the incident per se.
Yeah, we just heard from a relative in the UK who said he was apparently with his brother. We do know that he was in seat 11A. Is there any significance to that at all?
It's an important question that you ask, and it's a question that gets brought up quite honestly when there are incidents in any aviation situation, whether it's air turbulence, an impact incident, or as we've seen on this aircraft, an explosion. So much of it depends on exactly what the incident is. So if it's impact by implication, you'd want to be further at the back. The fuel is carried to avoid an incident, because there are so many different types of incidents that can take place.
And we were trying to ascertain just how much fuel would be required to make that journey. How much are we talking?
It's a very critical point, in that because the journey was just at its beginning, we're looking at about, I believe, an estimated 130 to 140 tons of fuel. So that was the maximum volume in terms of the explosion magnification. I think what's also really important, if I may add, and just listening to your previous conversation, the impact that this is having as an airline industry incident, and with Air India. Air India is a very, very proud flag carrier of the people of India and globally all the diaspora. So they're feeling this quite deeply, especially as the fact that Air India came back into the ownership of the Tata organization, which again is another pillar of India. So this is hurting Indians, not only those that are connected to the airline and AI-171 itself.
We'll come on to talk to that in just a second, Anita, because I'm really interested to understand the physics and the ergonomics of what's happened here. When you mentioned so much fuel, to think that there's a survivor is just remarkable given the size of that explosion we've seen. Just how on earth is that possible?
It's an important question, and we don't know the answers as yet, in the same way that there are many answers we need to understand about what happened, how it happened, why it happened, and as you say, why was someone able to walk away? And hopefully there will be more. I think an important part of this as well, though, Gordon, is the fact that as much as a passenger was able to walk away physically, psychologically, the damage that has been done is intense. In any crisis, the neurological system absorbs the shock. I can't even imagine what the recovery process is going to be, because he will have to weave this trauma in. He'll never really get over it. Likewise, the family, because in addition to the terror that he went through, he lost a family member. So there's that absorption of reality as well. So physically, he might be able to walk away, but he will carry the scars of this incident for the rest of his life.
Now, Anita, when you're watching the footage that we've seen so far today, what are you looking at? What are the key indicators of things that you can find some evidence to point towards what perhaps went wrong?
I think what we found is that we do have evidence of a mayday call. We do have evidence of exactly the retraction of the landing gear. Why was it there? Why was it so visible? Why was it a situation where the flaps were not necessarily where they should have been? That's a critical aspect of it. So all of these little details will be coming out. We'll also be finding in the investigation examination of the airport conditions. We're getting a sense of what happened in the cockpit with the pilot, with the data recorders, the voice recorders. All of that information, that intelligence is vital. And that's why we need to hold back on the speculation and any risk of pointing guilt to be able to allow, especially Boeing and Airbus, Boeing and Air India, to work very much hand in hand. Thankfully, the leaders on both sides are exceptional. We have absolutely Campbell Wilson, who came on from Singapore Airlines onto Air India, leading as one of the veterans and real respected leaders of global aviation at the helm. In the last 2 hours, he's put out a direct video message to the world, communicating from Air India. That's important, because people need to see the CEO at a time like this. Likewise with Boeing, with Kelly Ortberg, who will absolutely be stepping up, as he has in the past year, to take ownership of what's happened and work with the airline to make sure that their customer and their partner is able to move through this in a way that we can learn from and allows them to heal as well.
Anita, I wonder if you could clear up for us how many pilots would be on board, because we've had a couple of messages suggesting there might be 3 pilots on a Dreamliner flight.
What has been anticipated is very much that it was 10 crew and 2 pilots on top of that. So we're looking at 12 in total, and the rest being the passengers. And it's an enormous loss. And you can imagine how, again, even in addition to the family and friends of the passengers, the family and friends and colleagues of the Air India community equally are very much grieving at this point in time.
Now, the flight was only 30 seconds, I think, into its journey across the London-Brown journey. What are the procedures for handling a moment in that critical phase? As you mentioned, there's a mayday call, but when things go wrong, what happens then in the cockpit?
Oh, this is where, sadly, it's very difficult. When you're having an aircraft on its point of departure, there's a point at which they literally hit what is called V1, which is go or no go. Because there's such a force in the aircraft, it either has to take off, or there's a point before that where there's a possibility of stopping. But once you've hit that go, no go point, you have to take off. The challenge here was that there wasn't enough lift. And that's when we start looking at what was happening with the undercarriage, what was happening with the flaps. But once that mayday call was put in, they knew immediately there was a problem because it wasn't able to be responded to. So something severe was happening. Was it a technical issue? We don't know. Was it a pilot error? We don't know. But hopefully the answers will come out soon. And again, hopefully we also don't lose our focus on the grieving that's taking place for all of those lives that were lost.
And I need to finish, we have heard from pilots today and aviation experts who pointed out the impeccable safety record of the 787 Dreamliner. But as a reminder for people who may be boarding long-haul flights today, Boeing 787s, Dreamliners and air travel generally is incredibly safe, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Every single day, 100 to 150,000 flights take off. This is one flight. It is absolutely critical. It's unique, and we must not forget every single passenger and crew on board. But it's one aircraft, and so it is absolutely one of the most valuable and safe airlines and aircrafts in the world. And that's why I also want to emphasize Air India has an exceptional track record as well. It's not only the manufacturer. So both of those should be continuing to instill confidence. We simply need to learn what on earth happened and how do we keep hope alive that more than just seat 11A will walk away.
Anita, thank you very much for your expertise this afternoon. We really appreciate it. Anita Mendelata there, a global aviation consultant. It's now 5:27.
It's Claire and Gordon with you. I'm live from Gatwick Airport this afternoon as we sort of head towards the time that this flight, this Air India flight, was due to land here at Gatwick Airport in just an hour from now. Tragically, we know that flight has crashed. We understand that there has been a survivor from that flight, a man whose family are in Leicester and they have spoken to the BBC. He is named as Viwash Kumar Ramesh, We have been speaking to his relative AJ Valji, who said that Viwash has called his family and said he's fine. So that is one British survivor from the Air India flight. The BBC understands that the Indian High Commission in London has received calls from a number of relatives and emergency visas have been issued. It has opened a special emergency number for families to get emergency visa assistance to travel to India if needed. The number is this: 07768 765 035. That's 07768 765 035. Now, as we've been telling you, the Gatwick-bound plane came down just seconds after takeoff from Ahmedabad in Gujarat state. We can talk now to Vimalji Odera, who is the president of the National Council of Gujarati Organisations in the UK. Welcome to the programme. An incredible shock to your community. What have people been saying to you this afternoon?
Yeah, hi. It is absolutely really a sad news for our whole community. There are a lot of, I think, students and were involved who were coming from Gujarat, and most of the people who were coming were from Gujarat. And National Council of Gujarati Organization is associated with all the Gujarati, and yes, so even the past CM, Vijay Rupani, who came before in UK as well, we did celebrate it together. We had one of the event where we were involved together with the organization. We have lost him as well. Same way, I think the whole airline and their staff and crews, and I'm sure pilots and everyone and the team and worldwide is a total shock, really. So yes, we are got the meeting this evening at 7 p.m. and our executive committee meeting. We will try to see what we can help community-wise. We will put our flyers. We're getting few problems with some of families traveling, and we are coordinating with the Indian Embassy, and we're getting a quite good support from Indian Embassy as well. So yes, at the moment, that's what we're trying to do on behalf of our organization for our community. And as I said, it's very, very, very sad news at the moment for us.
Vimalji, apologies, I'm at a very, very noisy, busy Gatwick airport at the moment, and I think you were just describing somebody that you knew on the flight. I understand you knew two of the children whose parents may have been on the flight. That's what I've been told. Can you tell us more?
Yes, basically this morning I had a phone call from one of community member. He mentioned to me that the mom passed away. Father took the ashes to the India for ceremonial things. He was coming back in this airline, and of course, as we know, very sadly, he passed away as a part of this incident. Two young children, maybe 6 and 7 or so, and there's no relationship, unfortunately, guardian or here, grandparent maybe. So basically, yes, what happened, the children needed sort of, from the airline, they would like to see that guardian gives permission to travel, and that was a problem. So no ticket was getting, they could not buy a ticket, and apparently I contacted embassy, Indian Embassy, and we got a good support from Indian Embassy, and the matter is in hand now.
And that's the issue, isn't it, really? Because this tragedy happened so far away. It's a question of getting people emergency visas who want to get out there quickly. Are you finding a lot of people are contacting you to say that's what they want to do?
Pardon?
Are you hearing from any people who are trying to get out to Ahmedabad to... I mean, we're hearing that that's what's happening in India, that special flights are being laid on from New Delhi, from Mumbai. We're hearing that here in the UK as well, special flights are being laid on. Are many people saying to you that that's what they want to do? They want visas to get out there?
Yes, and have approached, of course, and the embassy